earlier today, I sold a portion of my SoFi position. I trimmed a very little bit and I posted about it like an idiot on Twitter. And I got a lot of backlash in terms of people, some of them questioning the move, some of them congratulating it, but most were simply confused because I'm over here talking on videos about how SoFi is going to go to $20. And here I am trimming some of my positions. So what gives? And so I thought I'd hop on a video and share some thoughts around what I'm doing with my position and why I trimmed a portion of that position. So let's jump right in. Okay, so I do want to walk through the actual post and give a full update on my SoFi position and also what I plan to do going forward with regards to that position. SoFi is currently $15.63 as of this recording. This is super ad hoc, me just talking to the camera. And the reason why I sold, and I think this added context is really important, is I needed the capital to invest in a private investment. I work in tech. A lot of our compensation is in the form of equity. And whenever you switch jobs, you have a certain time period where you can exercise that option to essentially buy shares and go on the cap table. And that's exactly what I'm going through right now. I have until early December, next couple of weeks here, to essentially exercise some shares. And I couldn't raise that amount of money just, by selling calls and through just normal cash flow. It was a time sensitive thing and I needed the capital. And so what I did was I essentially trimmed across the board many positions, not just SoFi, to be able to raise that capital. So the tweet reads, SoFi position update. I took profits on 10% of shares, letting 90% ride. Will trim more around $20. SoFi is currently 35% of my portfolio. And I've made videos, in the past where it was 17%, 18%. Well, it's actually doubled. So the shares are up over 106%, probably a little bit more now. The leaps that I hold with the exact strike prices, they're mostly all up in triple digits. I have been buying leaps as late as $11, $12 a share. I've still been adding to that leaps position. The leaps position as a whole is about 10% of the total SoFi position. So it's definitely significant. I hold 2025s for January. That's my biggest leaps position. And then my second biggest is the 2027s. $15 calls that are up 290%. I also own calls in January of 2026. And I think in another account, I might have June of 2026. And that's also one of the reasons why I chose to sell SoFi. Because as I'm thinking about it, trying to put myself in the shoes of the people watching this video, the question that comes up is, hey, why sell SoFi and not just cut some other positions more heavily and leave SoFi untouched because you're still bullish on this company? You have the highest level of conviction on this company. Well, a couple of reasons. I think the first is that there's a lot of SoFi gains. I'm up 2x on SoFi. And so a lot of that money is just essentially house money. And then the second one is because of the leaves position is why I ultimately chose to let go of a little bit of my SoFi ownership, just 10% or so, because the share ownership that I can take hold of after those leaps is much larger than what I already sold. Because if I choose to exercise all of those leaps at those prices, my position in SoFi would be like 50% plus of my portfolio at today's prices. The leaps represent a large number of underlying shares that I have control over, whether I want to exercise or whether I want to flip that contract. I still think that SoFi is undervalued at these levels. I think $15 a share is good. It's getting to that place where, we're getting some recognition. And I think that SoFi is going to $20 by the end of the year. Like I still hold by those statements. And I'm still very bullish on SoFi in general. I'm still going to continue making content on SoFi. I'm by no means, selling out of SoFi. It's just that I really needed that liquidity in a short time frame because I just couldn't raise that money and I didn't want to let those options expire. And the reason why I didn't want to let those options expire is because this particular company that I'm buying into, we had a capital raise last year, and those shares that I'm grandfathered into are now worth 5x what they were. And so I would essentially be leaving 5x of gains on the table if I didn't exercise, which is the stupidest thing you can do. And so I'm obviously exercising and I had to find the money somewhere. And that's exactly what I ended up doing. Now, at $17 billion where SoFi is trading right now, we're really coming close to that S&P 500 market cap inclusion criteria, because around $20 a share, we're going to have over $18 billion in market cap, and we're going to be eligible for that S&P inclusion. That could happen as early as mid 2025 to end of 2025, probably around Q3 realistically, if we hold those levels. And that's going to drive the shares higher, because if we get into the S&P 500, then obviously we're going to have huge buying pressure from these ETFs, which is going to drive the shares higher. Not to mention that I'm still bullish also for the fact that management has some very serious incentives that they want to reach certain levels by 2026. Their first tranche is $25 and their last tranche is $45 per share. And so I do think that they're going to hit those, at least one of the tranches. And I also think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to let go of some SoFi shares, because the leaps that I bought are aligned with those incentives. And I was buying leaps even as we broke $10 a share, as we broke $11 a share. And so I think from a value perspective, the leaps have about 10% of my total SoFi position. And I thought about selling the options as opposed to selling the underlying stock. But the reason I went with selling some of the underlying stock is because I am incredibly bullish. And I think that the leaps can appreciate far more than the underlying stock can appreciate over the next several years. And so I can definitely make that money back. Even if I choose to buy into the January 2025 leaps in like 30 trading days, I can come back and I can say, okay, well, I have a SoFi position here that's even larger than what I had to start with before I did any selling. And so it is just a time bound thing where I needed the liquidity immediately. And then over time, I have those leaps, which give me entry points at different prices. So I'm not really planning to trim any more of my position because I don't really need to. And there's no, pressure on me to essentially lock in any of those gains on a company that I'm already bullish on going even further. I think when we're in the 20s and especially above that price, then that's when it gets more into consideration. If I want to take more off the table and then buy into those leaps, or if I want to sell those leaps and buy into the shares at whatever the price is trading at right now. So essentially that's how I'm planning to maneuver it. I think the leaps give me a lot of optionality if I want to come back into SoFi. And like I said, if I exercised all those leaps at today's prices, I would have a position that would be half of my portfolio in SoFi. And so it's just lots of optionality for me to be able to take some money off the table right now, get this private deal through and actually, lock that in. And then over time, I can end up with an even larger SoFi position than I currently hold because the leaps give me that optionality. And I think the funniest thing is that, I could have just done all of this without making a post on X, but I ended up doing that. And it's funny because some people are, just congratulating me on locking in gains. And other people are just giving a lot of backlash saying that I'm selling out of the stock or that I'm not bullish on the stock anymore. And the reality is that it was just a move that I had to make because of the short-term circumstance that I find myself in. The reason I made the post was number one, for transparency, but also number two, kind of for the laughs, because people were posting that just because I sold out, now SoFi is going to go to $50. And I thought that was funny to post about. So that's essentially why. But I also wanted to make this video to just explain the circumstances around that trade. And this is also one of the reasons why I really love investing, because it gives me that optionality. Like, hey, if I need XYZ amount of money that I can never raise on my own in a month, I have that there and I have that in gains. And I also have the option to buy back in, at $10 a share in 2026 if I wanted to, or at $15 a share, even in January if I wanted to. So I did want to clarify, because I am more bullish than ever on SoFi, especially with the Galileo deal, which we're going to talk about later tonight on SoFi Weekly, especially with the S&P 500 inclusion, with management's incentives and everything that they're doing from an underlying business perspective. TGL is starting up in January. There's so many things to love here, and I'm really on board for that trip. I just needed access to the funds immediately, because in 2 weeks, these options are going to expire from the private investment perspective. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope it wasn't too clickbaity for you. And I will see you tonight on the SoFi Weekly podcast, where I am sure to probably get grilled by the rest of the team in a pretty heavy way. So make sure to tune into that on this channel at 10 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for watching.